I like short stories, and I cannot lie. Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I'm one of the co-hosts for Short Story Summer, a reading event created by Brandy, the Literate Texan. This is my second vlog for the event, so I'm not going to go through all the details again. If you are new to Short Story Summer, or just curious, I'll link my first video and Randy's announcement below, and I'll find all my fellow co-hosts in the description of this video. I'm working my way through Randy's challenge board rather methodically. One column, 6 prompts, then on to the next. Some of my fellow co-hosts prefer more of a hunting and pecking approach. Either way works. Last time I tackled 6 different genres. This time I'm traveling through more than a century of short story history. 6 stories from 6 different periods, beginning in 1898 and ending with a short story published just a few days ago. So what did I read? For day 7 of Short Story Summer and my 19th century selection, I read The Brazilian Cat by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, also published as The Story of the Brazilian Cat. The story is in the public domain and is available free from Project Gutenberg in the collection Round the Fire Stories. I'll put a link in the description of this video. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is, of course, famous for creating Sherlock Holmes. But Doyle had a complicated relationship with his famous detective. He became frustrated that Holmes overshadowed the rest of his writing and wanted to be taken seriously for his historical fiction. Doyle's personal favorite among his own works was The White Company, an adventure novel set during the 100 Years' War. And The Brazilian Cat gives us a chance to see Doyle doing something other than Sherlock Holmes. The narrator, Marshall King, is a young man with expensive tastes, aristocratic connections, great expectations, and virtually no money. His wealthy uncle owns one of England's great estates, and Marshall expects eventually to inherit. Unfortunately, his uncle isn't particularly interested in giving him any money while he's still alive. With financial ruin approaching, Marshall receives an invitation from his cousin, Everard King, who has recently returned from Brazil and is now living comfortably on his own estate. Everard has brought something from Brazil with him. He keeps a collection of exotic animals, and the prize of his menagerie is what he calls a Brazilian cat, a huge black feline resembling a panther. Everard warns Marshall that the animal is extraordinarily dangerous. He raised it from a kitten, and it will tolerate him. Other people might not be so fortunate. And that's about as much of the plot as I'm going to tell you. The Brazilian Cat isn't a particularly complicated story. An astute reader will probably figure out what's happening before Marshall does. But that really doesn't matter, because Arthur Conan Doyle knew how to tell a story. Once everything is in its place, Doyle builds suspense and keeps tightening it. We may have a pretty good idea where things are going, but we still want to see exactly how they're going to get there. The story is sometimes classified as weird fiction or even supernatural fiction, but there's really nothing supernatural about it. The danger is quite real and quite physical. What probably added to the story's effectiveness for its original 19th century readers was the exoticism. A huge predatory animal brought back from Brazil would have seemed considerably more mysterious to the average Victorian reader than it does to us today. The Brazilian Cat isn't Sherlock Holmes, and it doesn't try to be. It's simply a good old-fashioned suspense story by a writer who knew exactly how to keep his readers turning pages. And it's a nice reminder that there was considerably more to Arthur Conan Doyle than a detective living at 221B Baker Street. For day 8 of Short Story Summer and my 1900 to 1949 selection, I read A Clean, Well-Lighted Place by Ernest Hemingway. It was first published in Scribner's Magazine in 1933, and it was included that same year in Hemingway's collection, Winner, Take Nothing. That should be in a blooper reel. You want to say hello, Bella? Bella, you want to say hello? Do you want to say hello? For day 8 of Short Story Summer and my 1900 to 1949 selection, I read A Clean, Well-Lighted Place by Ernest Hemingway. It was first published in Scribner's Magazine in 1933 and was also included that same year in Hemingway's collection, Winner, Take Nothing. Hemingway is one of the giants of 20th century American literature, famous for novels like The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, and For Whom the Bell Tolls. But I think it's in his short stories that his mastery of style and storytelling come together most perfectly. I first read A Clean, Well-Lighted Place way back at the University of Maryland for a class called Philosophy in Literature. The purpose of the class was to examine philosophical ideas through fiction, and the professor had a particular interest in existentialism. This story was a very good fit. James Joyce reportedly called A Clean, Well-Lighted Place one of the best short stories ever written. The story itself is remarkably simple. A deaf old man sits alone in a cafe late at night, its last remaining customer. Two waiters, one young and one older, talk about him and discuss his recent suicide attempt. The old man has money. He has a niece who looks after him, and yet he despairs. But notice that he doesn't drink at home, which he certainly could do if getting drunk were all that he wanted. He comes to the cafe. Perhaps simply being near other people still provides some comfort. The younger waiter wants the old man to leave so he can close the cafe and go home to his wife. The older waiter understands something the younger man doesn't. He understands why the old man needs a clean, well-lighted place. The older waiter has his own feelings of emptiness. At one point, he takes the Lord's Prayer, a Christian expression of trust in God, and replaces it with words of nada, Spanish for nothing. But I don't think the older waiter accepts that nothingness. In his own small way, he struggles against it. He keeps the cafe clean. He keeps it orderly. He keeps the lights on. That's his ritual. He cannot give the old man God. He cannot give him family, youth, certainty, or some grand meaning for existence. But he can give him a clean, well-lighted place. And maybe that's enough for the night. I think that's important. We live in troubled times. People have feelings of uneasiness, uncertainty, worry, and sometimes even dread. The day before rereading this story, I happened to watch a YouTube creator talking about people who are anxious about the times we're living through. She argued that people need to come together and create communities where they feel safe, where they feel wanted, and where they aren't judged. I don't know if she's ever read Hemingway, but listening to her, I realized she was describing essentially the same thing. We can't necessarily solve another person's problems. We can't give someone certainty. We can't always make the darkness go away. But we can provide a little light. We can provide some companionship. And we can provide a place where someone doesn't have to be alone. And sometimes what people need is simply a clean, well-lighted place. For day 9 of Short Story Summer and my 1950 to 1979 selection, I read A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. It was first published in 1953 in the multi-author anthology Modern Writing 1, published by Avon. Flannery O'Connor, who lived from 1925 to 1964, was an American novelist, short story writer, and essayist. She often wrote in the Southern Gothic tradition, relying heavily on regional settings, grotesque characters, dark humor, and sometimes shocking violence. Her writing also reflects her deeply held Catholic faith, frequently examining questions of morality, sin, redemption, and divine grace. The protagonist of A Good Man is Hard to Find, known simply as the grandmother, is taking a road trip with her son's family from Georgia to Florida. The grandmother strongly objects to this vacation because she's been reading newspaper stories about an escaped convict known as the Misfit. Nevertheless, she goes along because she couldn't possibly tolerate being left behind. The grandmother considers herself, above everything else, a lady. Eventually, after the grandmother leads the family astray with some faulty information, her son wrecks the car on a remote dirt road. The family climbs out of the wreck. Another car approaches. 3 men are inside. One of them is the misfit. And that's where we get to the heart of the story. The grandmother and the misfit begin to talk. The misfit isn't unintelligent. In his own peculiar way, he's even polite, all while remaining a stone-cold killer. He begins philosophizing about why he became the person he is, while the grandmother increasingly appeals to religion and Jesus and begs for mercy. The misfit is a chilling character because there is a strange logic behind what he believes. At one point he says, Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, and he shouldn't have done it. He threw everything off balance. And that gets at something fundamental about the misfit. There is one thing he doesn't know, something that seems to lie at the center of his twisted view of existence. I won't tell you what that is because I don't want to spoil the story. But here is another idea that is essential to understanding A Good Man is Hard to Find. Grace. Flannery O'Connor was very explicit that divine grace was central to the story. In Catholic theology, grace isn't something you necessarily earn by being a good person. It's something given by God, and it can arrive unexpectedly, even to deeply flawed people. And the grandmother is certainly flawed. She's selfish, she's manipulative, she's prejudiced, and she thinks of herself as a good Christian lady. But much of what she believes about goodness is superficial. Then she encounters the misfit. And in this horrifying situation, something happens. O'Connor asks us to consider whether a moment of genuine human connection, perhaps even a moment of grace, is possible in the presence of someone capable of terrible evil. I'm not religious at all. I don't share Flannery O'Connor's Catholic theology, and yet A Good Man is Hard to Find is one of my favorite stories, because I don't think you have to believe in divine grace to understand what O'Connor's getting at. You can read that moment religiously, or you can read it as an instant when one human being suddenly recognizes the humanity of another. And she does all of that in a story that is also darkly funny, deeply unsettling, and absolutely terrifying. That's why, for me, a good short story is something hard to beat. For day 10 of Short Story Summer, in my 1980 to 1999 selection, I read The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. The story was first published in Esquire in 1986 and later became the opening story of O'Brien's 1990 collection of link stories, also called The Things They Carried. Throughout the collection, O'Brien deliberately blurs the boundary between fiction and nonfiction. His narrator is even named Tim O'Brien and shares many of the experiences with the author, who served as a foot soldier in Vietnam. O'Brien has said that when he returned from Vietnam, he was struck by how little people back at home seemed to understand the reality of the war. Much of his writing became an attempt to bridge that distance. The Things They Carry does that through a remarkably simple device. Lieutenant Jimmy Cross is a 24-year-old platoon leader. Like other soldiers, he carries the physical necessities of war, but he also carries reminders of the world he left behind. For Jimmy, those are letters from Martha, a young woman back in the United States, whom he loves, although he realizes she probably doesn't love him. He handles her letters almost like sacred devices or sacred objects. Then the war intervenes, and gradually we realize that O'Brien isn't really writing about the physical things these soldiers carry, or at least not the only things. They carry fear, they carry responsibility, they carry memories and fantasies of home. They carry shame and grief, and they carry what O'Brien describes as their greatest fear, the fear of appearing afraid. These young men carry masks of composure because the people around them expect soldiers to be brave. I was never a soldier. Tim O'Brien was. And in about 25 pages, he gives me a glimpse into an experience I haven't had and probably can't fully understand. Maybe that's one of the things fiction can do particularly well. It can give us someone else's experience. For day 11 of Short Story Summer, in my 2000 to 2019 selection, I read Baby Doll by Johanna Sinisalo, translated from the Finnish by David Haxton. The story was originally published in 2002. I have it in the SFWA European Hall of Fame, edited by James and Catherine Morrow, although it has appeared in other anthologies as well. The English translation later received a Nebula Award nomination for Best Short Story. Johanna Sinisalo is a Finnish writer born in 1958. She's particularly associated with speculative fiction, although her work resists neat genre divisions. She's used the term Finnish weird for fiction that crosses boundaries among literary fiction, science fiction, fantasy, satire, and other forms. Last week, I read an intentionally shocking science fiction story, In the Barn, by Piers Anthony. Science fiction can be a very effective way of exposing something unsettling in contemporary society. Take something that already exists, exaggerate it, and then ask us whether we like what we see. Baby Doll does that very effectively. It's essentially a near-future social science fiction, and its central subject is the sexualization of children and the erosion of childhood. Annette is 8 years old. Sexuality, consumerism, fashion, and celebrity culture have all become important parts of her world. But she's 8 years old. Her parents don't seem particularly troubled by any of this. Annette's older sister, who is only 10, has become a sexualized sensation in commercial advertising. And Annette feels left out. She responds with all the emotional maturity of an 8-year-old can muster without really understanding the adult world around her. Because, after all, she's a child. Like in the barn, Baby Doll takes an uncomfortable tendency in our own society and pushes it further. Pierce Anthony asks, how can we accept treating human beings the way we treat animals? Johanna Sinisalo asks a different question. How far can we go in treating children like adults before we finally have to admit that something has gone terribly wrong? For day 12 of Short Story Summer and my 2020 selection, I read The Blight by Emma Cline. The story was just published online by The New Yorker on August 9th and appears in the August 17th issue. I read it on August 11th. So this is a really new story. I recently subscribed to the digital edition of The New Yorker, which I can read on my iPhone. So I thought I'd take advantage of it and read something that almost as soon as it was published. Emma Cline is an American novelist and short story writer from California. She published her first novel, The Girls, in 2016 to considerable acclaim, and has since published another novel, The Guest, and a collection of short stories called Daddy. In The Blight, David and his assistant, Cody, have arrived in London. Cody is helping David get to an exclusive private club where David is meeting his adult daughter, Rebecca. It soon becomes clear that David needs Cody's assistance for some of the basic functions of life. David isn't well. His memory is going. What follows is essentially David having dinner with his daughter. Bits and pieces of his life unfold before the reader. Nothing particularly extraordinary happens, but David has plans for himself, and his daughter may not agree with those plans. After finishing The Blight, I thought it was one of those slice of life stories where the author lifts the curtain for a little while and lets us peer into the characters' lives. We watch, we think about aging, memory, family, and what it might mean to lose those parts of ourselves. And then the curtain closes again. That's a perfectly fine way to tell a story. It's not necessarily my favorite mode of storytelling, but it works for a lot of readers. Then, at the bottom of my iPhone screen, after I finished the story, I noticed a little statement. This is drawn from Switzy. Oh. Switzy is Emma Cline's new novel, scheduled to be published in September. So what I had just read wasn't really the complete story of David. It was an excerpt from something much larger. And strangely enough, that changed how I thought about it. If I had been reading The Blight as a chapter in a novel, it was good enough and intriguing enough that I would have continued on to the next chapter. It didn't quite do enough to make me want to seek out Switzy when it's published. If my book group decided to read it, I certainly wouldn't argue against it. But based on this taste of the novel, I probably wouldn't be the person suggesting it either. Sometimes a short story leaves us wanting more. This one left me thinking what I read was probably enough. Okay, That's another 6 stories completed, and this was a particularly good group for me. It included 3 of my all-time favorite short stories: A Clean, Well-Lighted Place, A Good Man is Hard to Find, and The Things They Carried. But what I especially enjoyed about this column was seeing how much short fiction changed over more than a century, and how much it didn't. From Arthur Conan Doyle in 1898 to Emma Cline in 2026. Writers were still trying to do the same thing. Tell us something that matters and do it in a remarkably short amount of space. Next up on the challenge board is Around the World. Where will these stories take me? Thank you for watching. And as always, keep on reading.